The Steelers have been stable at quarterback for 18 years. Future Hall of Famer Ben Roethlisberger. Big Ben retired this offseason and left Pittsburgh having to fill a gigantic hole. And they did, by using their first-round pick at the 2022 NFL Draft on Kenny Pickett, out of none other than Pitt. Like I said, the Steelers were extremely stable at the quarterback position for 18 years under the guidance of Ben Roethlisberger. Pittsburgh made the Super Bowl 3 times and won twice. But now, the Steelers need a new quarterback, and that's why they went out and signed Mitch Trubisky this offseason. Safe to say that Trubisky hasn't exactly lived up to his expectations of going second overall to the Bears back in 2017. After a shaky rookie year in Chicago, he had a good sophomore season, making the Pro Bowl after he threw double the number of touchdowns to interceptions and went 11-3. That was, however, the peak of his career. He hasn't thrown even 20 touchdowns in a single season since, and the Bears declined his fifth-year option. Trubisky became a free agent and spent a year in Buffalo before this offseason he signed with the Steelers. Obviously, he hoped he would be the starter week 1, but maybe that won't be the case. At the 2022 NFL Draft, the Steelers selected Kenny Pickett out of Pitt. Yes, that Pitt that shares a stadium with the Steelers, but he wasn't exactly a stud from the moment he got to college. Let me be real here, I don't know if Kenny Pickett is where he is today if it weren't for COVID. His eligibility was almost up, and instead, he got one more year and turned himself into a first-round pick. Before 2021, Pickett was an average at best quarterback. He put up almost the exact same passing numbers the 2 seasons prior, 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, plus 10 rushing touchdowns over the span. That being said, Pickett did show a good amount of promise as a sophomore. He led the Panthers to their first ACC Coastal Division Championship and did throw double the number of touchdowns as interceptions. But at that point, Pickett was still doing more to ensure Pitt didn't lose rather than being the reason that they won. The most iconic game of his career is actually the only game he started as a freshman. No, not the ACC Championship game in December where he torched the Wake Forest and of course hit the defense with a fake slide that essentially led to a whole rule being made because of him. When Pickett was a freshman, Pitt decided to let him start the last game of the season and bench Ben DiNucci. Yes, the meme himself, Ben DiNucci. I guess the Panthers wanted to see what they had in Pickett, so they threw him to the Wolves against an undefeated number 2 Miami team. But then, Pitt shocked college football. Pickett scored 3 touchdowns and most importantly, didn't turn the ball over. It was a bright sliver of hope for Pitt. Of course, then Pickett was mostly mediocre, and even the year Pitt won the Coastal, he was only 500 as a starter. But hey, that's besides the point, because he figured it all out last season. Like Joe Burrow, Kenny Pickett came out of nowhere. It really makes no sense, but that doesn't matter. All of a sudden, Pickett was one of the best players in the country, breaking school records with over 4,300 yards and 42 touchdowns. He did it all for Pitt. He was an All-American, ACC Player of the Year, finished 3rd in Heisman voting, and went 11-2. Pickett turned Pitt into a winning program. And now, it's time to see if he can do the same for the Steelers. And he's going to have some help, like from George Pickens, who was taken a round after Pickett. George Pickens was a stud at Georgia, and did just win a national championship a few months ago. When he was a freshman, he led the Bulldogs with 49 receptions, 727 yards, and 8 touchdowns. Pickens was the go-to, but unfortunately, there were some bumps in the road. COVID shortened the 2020 season to only 8 games, and then in the spring, he tore his ACL. However, Pickens was able to return for the final 4 games of the season in 2021, enough to get him taken in the 2nd round. And now, he gets to play alongside Diontae Johnson. Johnson has turned into a really good wide receiver, one of many taken at the 2019 NFL Draft. Johnson went in the 3rd round and was actually selected with one of the picks the Raiders sent to the Steelers in exchange for Antonio Brown. Johnson had a solid rookie year with nearly 700 yards and 5 touchdowns. It was named a 2nd-team All-Pro as a return man. He improved in 2020 with over 900 yards and 7 touchdowns, and then you could say last season, Johnson really broke out. Over 1,100 yards and 8 touchdowns. He made the Pro Bowl and was the top weapon for an old Ben Roethlisberger. The number 2 weapon was Chase Claypool, who did have a really good rookie year in 2020 after the Steelers took him in the 2nd round. He had over 800 yards and was really expected to break out in 2022, but it just didn't happen. He had almost the exact same numbers, except instead of the 9 touchdowns he scored in 2020, he only had 2 last year. In the second round back in 2021, the Steelers drafted Pat Freiermuth, a tight end out of Notre Dame. In his rookie year, Freiermuth had almost 500 yards and 7 touchdowns. There's no doubt plenty of excitement for his future, along with the guy the Steelers took the round before him, Najee Harris. Yes, the Steelers used their first round pick on a running back. Not the best idea, but they really needed a back, and Najee was a stud in college. He actually won a national championship at Alabama, but didn't play too much because he was stuck behind Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris. But he went on to have a good college career for the Crimson Tide, like a really good career. He's Alabama's all-time leader in rushing yards, total scrimmage yards, and touchdowns. Then, as a rookie in Pittsburgh, he had 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns. Najee even made the Pro Bowl. It was a damn impressive season for a guy whose offensive line really fucking sucked. In fact, they were just the 24th best run blocking unit and were the 29th best in generating yards before contact at just 0.9 yards. Meaning, Najee really had to fight for those yards he was getting last year, just like most teams have to do when they play that insane Steelers defensive front. TJ Watt is just a complete menace. He's been an All-Pro for 4 straight years and was the Defensive Player of the Year in 2021 after he literally broke the NFL record for sacks with 22.5. Watt has only been in the league for 5 years, yet he has a ridiculous 72 sacks. It doesn't help opposing offenses that at tackle is Cameron Heyward, another 4-time All-Pro. Honestly, Heyward has been in Pittsburgh as long as I can remember. He's going into his 11th season with the Steelers since they drafted him in the first round in 2011 and is still terrorizing opposing quarterbacks. Then, in the secondary, the big name is Minkah Fitzpatrick. He's a beast, and everybody knows that. The Dolphins drafted him in the first round back in 2018, and then the Steelers traded a package including a first to get him. In 4 years, Minkah has 13 interceptions, 3 of which he took back for a touchdown, and he's even returned one of his 5 career fumble recoveries back to the house. Minkah is a stud, just like Watt and Heyward. But unfortunately, there's a lot more to a roster, and there are holes all around the rest of the Steelers' defense, something that definitely needs to be rebuilt fast. The Steelers are one of the most prestigious franchises in all of sports, let alone just in the NFL. Pittsburgh has won 6 Super Bowls, 2 of which I've watched in my lifetime. Ben Roethlisberger will go down as one of the best quarterbacks of all time, and he's only one of 12 quarterbacks to win multiple Super Bowls. But it's time to move on. Mitch Trubisky may be the starter this next season, but don't get it twisted because everything is about Kenny Pickett. And whether or not the Steelers can continue being a dynasty powerhouse all comes down to him. The Steelers have done a good job rebuilding what was once a dynasty, but it's going to be really tough to win in the AFC North for the foreseeable future. The Bengals are the expected winners of that division this season, and that's obviously what's going to happen when you go on a Super Bowl run. The Ravens, led by Lamar Jackson, still have a good team and are certainly going to be gunning for that AFC North title. The Browns are an odd one to me. I mean, it depends on when Deshaun Watson plays, if he ever does, but if he does, Cleveland is a contender. The Steelers have a long, hard road ahead of them.
That's what she said.
But for now, Pittsburgh is doing everything in their power to put their franchise in a successful position for the future.